FMM. Viene hoy de Inglaterra y se va hoy solo para hacer la demo.
Hi, so today we're going to be making a 2-tier christening cake with little booties and name blocks as well.
Va a hacer una tarta de 2 pisos de bautizo con patucos.
So we're going to start with the booties, and I'm using a lilac paste. So this is sugar paste that has got CMC added.
Fondant al que le ha puesto CMC y va a empezar con eso para hacer los patucos.
So I'm just going to start by kneading the
Empieza
paste.
amasando un poquito la pasta.
And what I'm actually going to be using to make the booties today is the textured lace 2-set by FMM. And as well as the actual cutters that you get in the set, I've also got a template as well to cut the booty from.
Va a usar esos moldes de FMM con unas plantillas para hacerle el patuco.
So start by popping the paste onto the board and rolling out.
Ya está extendiendo con el rodillo.
And for the sole, we want this to be probably around 5 millimeters in thickness, so that the actual back part of the shoe has got something to grab onto.
Para la suela lo tiene que dejar un poco gordito. How many millimeters?
5.
5 milímetros.
3 to 5.
3 y 5 milímetros.
So before we actually start to cut the booties from the template, you always want to make sure that your paste moves freely on the board. So I've just dusted with a small amount of corn flour, cornstarch.
Para que no se pegue, le ha puesto un poquito de maicena y va a cortar con un cúter y va a cortar la plantilla que ya tiene de FMM.
And I'm just going to place a small amount on top of the paste so that the actual template doesn't stick.
Y para que no se pegue la plantilla, también le pone maicena por la parte de arriba.
And then using a craft knife, X-Acto knife or similar, you just cut
Es un
carefully.
cúter de manualidades especial para alimentación.
Just take your time with this as well.
Lleva un poquito de tiempo, pero bueno.
And then you can just sort of go around and neaten any cut edges. You don't need to worry too much about this because the actual cut edges are going to be covered with the back and front of the shoe.
Suaviza un poquito con los dedos para que quede más uniforme, pero que no nos preocupemos porque luego eso no se va, luego va a recortar un poco más.
So next we're going to attach the back part of the shoe. So this part here.
Ahora va a poner la parte de atrás, la del talón.
And for the back, you want the paste to be a little bit thinner than we rolled for the base.
Ahora la quiere más delgadita, entonces me imagino que 2 milímetros o so.
Yeah, 2-3 millimeters.
Como 2-3 milímetros ahora de grosor.
So again, dust your board, make sure the paste moves freely.
Aseguraos que no está nada pegado a la base, que le hemos puesto bastante maicena.
And again, with a sharp knife, you place the back template down onto the paste and just carefully
Pega la
cut out.
plantilla y corta con el cúter. Es muy interesante la bolsita que tiene para la maicena. Tiene aquí para abrir y se va rellenando.
And just take your time with this part, especially when you're cutting sort of in and around the strap.
Tomaos vuestro tiempo para hacerlo bien. Can you tell us the proportion of CMC in the...
Yes, so for obviously the paste that I'm using today is the sugar paste per CMC, and I always use, so to 250 grams of sugar paste, it's 1 teaspoon of CMC or Tylo powder.
La proporción que ella usa de CMC con pasta de goma, o sea, con fondant, es una cucharadita de CMC, o sea, un teaspoon, una cucharadita con 250 gramos de fondant. And then you have to wait like 8 hours or...
No, I tend to find with the CMC, it can be pretty much used straight away. It's if you're using the gum tragacanth, which you would need to leave overnight, but CMC can be used
Y lo usa directamente, no deja esperar nada. Dice que si usara goma tragacanto en vez de CMC, lo tendría que dejar esperar unas horas, pero con el CMC directamente ya lo usa.
Right, so this is the back part of the shoe that's been cut. And what I like to do is just sort of run just your finger over the cut edges just to soften.
Suaviza un poquito los bordes con los dedos.
And then so this is edible glue here, this has been made, I've made myself using the CMC powder, which is just 1 part CMC to 30 parts water.
Es pegamento comestible y ha utilizado 1 parte de CMC y 3 partes de agua. O sea que es como muy espeso el que ha hecho ella.
So I'm just brushing the base just very lightly with a small amount of the glue.
Muy poquita cantidad de pegamento por uno de los lados.
And I'm then just simply going to attach the back
y ahora lo va ajustando a la suela.
Just pressing around as you go to make sure that the back is actually adhered to the sole. You can at this stage as well, if you find your paste is a little bit soft, is you can take a little bit of cling film or kitchen paper and you can actually pop that in there to almost use as a sort of former so it dries in a nice position.
Dice que si está un poquito blando el fondant y veis que se cae un poco, le podemos poner un poquito de papel de cocina, de servilletas, algo así para que se mantenga la forma.
Right, so then just want to put the toe strap across. So just a small amount of glue.
Poquito de pegamento.
And just pull across.
Y cierra el zapato.
So that's the back done now. And again, you could actually insert some paper or cling film under the strap here so it will dry rather than sometimes you may find that it would droop down. So if you put some paper underneath and it will just dry in an upright position.
Si queréis que así más formado, se le pone un poquito de papel debajo. Y si no, cae un poco, pero también yo creo que le da movimiento. Pero como queramos.
Right, so now we're going to add this front part of the shoe, and this is the part that's made using the textured lace set.
Ahora va a hacer la parte de delante. La verdad es que no hace falta que traduzca nada, ¿no? Porque se ve lo que está haciendo, pero bueno, que para esto sí que va a usar el cortador con el marcador.
And it comes as well. I'm using this design today. I don't know if they can see
Ese va a
that.
utilizar ahora con esa forma, pero dice que tiene otras marcas diferentes.
You'll see in a moment how it works, but 2 different embossing plates and 1 cutter.
O sea que vienen con el mismo cortador, vienen diferentes modelos para hacer la parte de delante diferente.
So again, we roll the paste out 2 or 3 millimeters thick.
2 o 3 milímetros de grosor, extendemos.
Make sure your paste moves on the board.
Te tienes que asegurar que se mueve bien para que no esté pegada a la tabla.
And good idea to just add a touch of either icing sugar or cornstarch to the top of your paste,
Y un poquito,
so that when we remove the embosser, it doesn't stick and it comes freely away.
De maicena antes de ponerle el marcador.
So place the cutter onto the paste, the embosser, and just press quite a firm pressure. You want to make sure that you get all of that design into the paste.
Presionamos fuerte de una vez y retiramos el marcador.
Then you lift from one of the corners, and
Vamos a las esquinas primero.
don't know if you can see. So all we do now, so in the set, so there's this design that I've just used, and there's also another more of a waffle design. But you then take the cutter, and it's been made so this will literally just slot into the grooves. So pop that in, you'll feel when it's in the right position, and just...
Y ahora con el cortador cortamos. Ahí hemos puesto cualquiera de los marcadores Con el cortador se corta y ya queda perfecta la forma.
So you just move it around on the board, and then you just end up with your piece like this. So just to fit the actual booty, I'm just going to trim off these 2 side pieces.
Le va a cortar un poquito la parte del final. Porque because this one is also valid for
Yeah, so you could use for borders of a cake, around the base of a cake, you know, along the top edge.
Le corta un poquito los piquitos de ahí porque en realidad se podría utilizar pues para hacer bordes de tartas o incluso yo pienso para la parte de delante de un zapatito de tacón o algo. Pero para el patuco tenemos que quitarle los piquitos.
Right, so once we've trimmed those off, again take your edible glue.
Pegamento comestible.
And just brush just along the bottom part.
Todo solo por la parte de abajo, un poquito.
And this is then and just work your fingers around to make sure that there's no little gaps. And again, if your paste is tending to flop down at the front here, you can pop some tissue or cling film into here to hold the shape.
Otra vez, que si el fondant veis que está muy blandito y se cae, pues le ponemos un poquito de papel dentro para que se mantenga la forma.
So that's the finished booty. Basically for this particular cake, we'd be making, so you do 2 of these, so you've got the pair that would sit on the top tier. So I'm going to pop that to one side
Ya está
for the
terminado
moment.
uno, tiene otro hecho aquí para que haya una parejita.
And I'm now going to move on to show you how to make the name blocks, which will sit on the base of the board at the front of the cake.
Ahora va a hacer el borde de la tarta. Los cuadrados. What do you want to make now?
Name blocks. So names
sí.
to spell
Ahora va a
out the
hacer
name
las
of
cajitas,
so
las
you do your
cajitas con
child's
el
name.
nombre de juguete de los niños.
Right, so I'm using the same paste. So again, this is sugar paste. So 1 teaspoon of CMC. I'm just going to stand up just
Otra vez pasta
to
de
get this
goma,
going.
una cucharadita de CMC con 250 gramos de fondant y directamente lo trabaja. Amasa.
So you're going to give this a good knead. If you find as well when you're kneading the paste, like this is quite dry. This has flown all the way from the UK this morning. You can just knead in a little bit of Crisco, white vegetable fat, which just tends to, or helps to bring it back.
Notáis que el fondant está un poquito seco, pues le ponemos un poquito de Crisco, de sugar, no, de petal base o petal base. Okay. You know the weather is so dry in Madrid, so everything is dry.
Dries out quicker than back home.
Es que aquí el clima es tan seco que se seca todo. Sí, pero un poquito de manteca lo hidrata. Manteca vegetal, Crisco. Para que no se cuarte. Exacto.
Right, getting there. Right, so when that's kneaded and you're happy that it's nice and soft, no cracks.
Cuando ya lo tenemos bien amasado.
So what you want to try and do now, because how we're going to actually make the blocks is to roll the paste into a long sausage. So you want to sort of
para hacer los cuadraditos, los cubos, va a extender y va a hacer como un gran rulito.
So we want to try and get it into a nice smooth ball.
Primero una bola
with no cracks.
Sin ninguna grieta.
It's quite a workout because it's quite a lot of paste.
Y esto hay que tener y darle calor y trabajarlo bien para que no haya ni una grieta.
So I think that's about there.
Madrid weather is terrible. It's so dry.
I think it's done well to come so far. It's not really that far, but right. So when you're happy with that, on your board, and you just start rolling.
Empezamos a extender, a hacer el rulito.
And you want to try and keep this as even in thickness as you can.
Y lo vamos extendiendo en plan gordito y uniforme.
Almost there, touch more. Right, so that's pretty much even all the way along.
Está bastante uniforme.
So what we do now, I like to start by just taking my fingers and just smoothing to sort of help flatten the top of the paste.
Con su mano está aplanando la parte de arriba del rulito.
Or you can even take your rolling pin and just run it across.
También podemos aplanarlo con ayuda del rodillo.
And then I use an icing smoother.
Y ahora va con el alisador de FMM, por supuesto.
Just pressing this along the top, and this helps to, if the sausage isn't quite even or thicker in some parts, by just doing this, if you're using a nice even pressure, it will just even out the paste so you maintain the same thickness throughout.
El alisador nos sirve para alisar y luego también para ir haciendo más uniforme la salchichita esta que ha hecho.
So once that's done, so I'm using these 2 square cutters, which are part of the geometric set, which also comes with ovals and circles.
Va a utilizar esos 2 cuadrados que forman parte de un juego de cortadores geométricos, que son una monada, todos pequeñitos, ovalados, triángulos, cuadrados.
Okay. Right, so to start off with the blocks, take the larger of the 2 cutters, and you just want to press into the top of the paste. Again, when you've done this, you want to make sure that the actual width of the paste is wider than the cutter. If it's not and you try to press in, you won't end up with even blocks.
Ahora está marcando con el cortador grande y ha dicho que nos aseguremos de que lo introduce bien toda la parte blanca.
So you can see how we've embossed the paste all along. This is just to give us, it just acts as a guideline when we're actually cutting out. So next you take a sharp knife and just position the knife into the mark from the cutter and just press down.
Cortamos con un cuchillo bien afilado.
So you do this for all of your blocks.
Exactamente todos los bloques por cada una de las marcas.
And however many blocks you need to cut out, for example, if it was a particularly long name, it's sometimes more tricky, but you always want to try and cut them from the same piece of paste. If I were to cut these out and then roll out a second piece of paste, the chances are you're never going to get it to be the same thickness.
Es importante que el rulito lo hagamos del tamaño que nos vaya a caber en cada cuadradito una letra del nombre. Si el nombre es muy largo, hacemos un rulito bien grande, porque si hacemos luego otro rulito, seguramente que no nos va a salir del mismo tamaño. Y en cada cuadrado irá una letra del nombre. Here?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Right, so now turn them around and trim off the other 2 sides.
Seguimos cortando los 2 lados.
And you want to make sure as well that the blade you use is really quite sharp. If it's not sharp enough, then you'll get quite a ragged edge.
Tiene que ser bien afilado el cuchillo para que el corte sea perfecto.
Right, any unused paste you can just pop back to
Lo
be
guardamos
reused.
siempre lo que nos sobre para que no se seque.
Right, so they're all trimmed now. So the side that's facing down, so this side here, this is actually going to be the front of the blocks because this is the side that's been uncut, so is the side that's most pleasing to the eye.
Esa es la parte de abajo, es la que va a ser la de enfrente al final, la buena.
So to get them perfectly square, what we do now is what was the top part, just turn to the side and you'll see how there's a curve.
Como la
So
parte
to
de
get
arriba
them
está un poco
perfectly
abombada,
straight,
ahora la vamos a cortar para que quede bien recta.
just trim that back side off on all of them. Right, what we do then, so you'll need 2 of your icing smoothers.
Y ahora con 2 alisadores de fondant.
And you press the top down and you just basically work, so making sure that the straight edge is flush with the board.
Nos aseguramos que la parte lisa del alisador está abajo hacia la base y vamos aplastando arriba y ajustando a los lados.
And you just basically keep pressing the sides together until you're happy that you've got
Y ya tenemos los
perfectly
cubos
square.
perfectos.
And you're best taking your time over these. And what you'd probably normally do if you've got, a few blocks like I have here, is you could actually pop them into a Ziploc bag, so that if you take your time on each, the other blocks aren't actually drying out.
Si tuviéramos muchos más bloques o cubos, lo que haríamos sería guardarlos en una bolsa y para que no se nos sequen mientras los vamos trabajando.
Two more to go.
Os voy a hacer una pregunta. ¿Se ven bien las pantallas? ¿Bien? Gracias.
And these can be made in all different sizes as well. There is a larger square cutter that comes in the set, which you could also use.
En el set hay un cortador más grande todavía de cuadrados.
Right, so when you're quite happy that you've squared those off, what you can then do is if you line them up together, just to make sure they are at the same heights. Can't
Cuando ya
really
los
see what
tenemos
I'm doing there.
todos, los alineamos para asegurarnos que están todos del mismo tamaño.
But just by pressing along, it ensures that they are even. You can see, should be even heights.
Y ya están todos de la misma altura, mismo tamaño.
Again, any unused paste you can pop back to reuse.
Siempre guardamos bien en una bolsa con cierre zip.
Excuse me. Right. I'm just going to roll the paste. If you've seen the card that's been going around with the picture of the actual finished cake, you will see that as well as having the blocks, there's a smaller square which is made using this cutter here, just to sit in the centre of each block, and then obviously the letters of the name.
Si habéis visto la foto que ha pasado antes, los bloques tenían otro cuadradito pequeño donde iban las letras y para eso va a utilizar el cuadrado pequeño, cortador de cuadrado pequeño.
Right, so for the smaller squares to go in the centre of each block, I'm just going to roll some white paste. Again, this is sugar paste, so 250 grams sugar paste, 1 teaspoon of CMC.
Está utilizando el mismo tipo de fondant. Ahora en blanco va a utilizar para hacer los cuadrados o los cubitos pequeños.
Now this you want to roll out fairly thinly.
Va a extender bastante fino. Less than 1 or 2.
A millimeter.
1.5.
Yeah.
1,5 milímetros más o menos de grosor.
I don't know if you can. It's fairly thin.
Bien finito, 1 milímetro, 1,5 milímetros.
Probably go a touch thinner than that.
Para los que me entendáis, un 16avo de pulgada, que es como hacemos en Wilton.
Right, so what I'm going to do now is just pop this to. Just going to pop a little bit of cornstarch down and pop this to one side. This is just, if you leave it to air dry for around 10 minutes and the paste has had time to firm up, when you try to add them to the blocks, because it has had chance to firm up and it holds its shape a little bit, you'll find it's much easier to position the squares, the smaller squares, onto these blocks. If your paste was very soft and you were adding them to these, if you didn't get it quite in the centre and you were moving it around with your finger, you then distort the shape of the paste and get finger marks in.
Es mejor esperar un ratito a cortar los cuadrados, unos 10 minutos, porque si está muy blando el fondant se nos va a deformar cuando vayamos a pegarlo en el cubo grande. Entonces, si está más duro, luego si no lo centramos bien se puede incluso mover con el dedo fácilmente. Así que lo va a dejar un poquito ahí en reposo.
Right, so that's set now to one side to dry for a few minutes, and I'm now going to roll out. So this is pink, again sugar paste with CMC, and this is to cut the letters, which we're going to be used. Some of you may be familiar with these tappets.
Entonces ahora, mientras tanto, va a ir cortando las letras y va a utilizar esos cortadores tan chulos y con un rosa un poquito más claro va a extender
Thin, yes.
Finito.
Very thin, as thin as you can get. The thinner, the better with the tappets. So again, what I always recommend when you're using the tappets is same sort of process as I said, to leave this to air dry. I always roll my paste as thinly as possible, wafer thin, and you would then leave it to sit for 10 minutes and it makes it so much easier.
For the letters.
Yes.
Entonces, cuando va a cortar con este tipo de cortador de letras, lo que hace es extender súper fino, y, o sea que ya no es 1,5 milímetros, es mucho más fino, es casi como para pétalos.
See-through. Yeah.
Y ahora lo va a dejar secar unos minutos porque es mucho más fácil también cortar de esta manera.
I don't know if you can see. Really wafer
Súper
thin.
fino, como papel.
To make it easier as well to roll out thinly, before adding any icing sugar or corn flour, if you just grease your board lightly with Crisco white vegetable fat, it allows you to roll your paste a lot thinner, a lot more quickly. So if you were trying to roll out this thin on corn flour, as you were rolling, the paste would just be lifting and coming back round your pin. So what you would do is you roll out on the fat and you would then move to a different area of your board before you use the cutters so that the paste moves.
Cuando queremos extender tan fino es mucho más fácil poner un poquito de Crisco, manteca vegetal, y nos va a permitir extenderlo más fino. Si queremos extenderlo fino y ponemos maicena debajo, es más difícil que te quede fino. Entonces lo he extendido sobre manteca vegetal, Crisco, y ahora aparte le he puesto un poquito de maicena y ahí lo va a dejar secarse un ratito.
Right, so while we leave the paste to firm up for a few minutes, I'm now going to move on to show you how to add the lace border to the cake.
Mientras se seca, los dos trocitos de fondant, pasta de goma que ha hecho para hacer la parte que queda de los cubos, nos va a enseñar cómo hacer el borde de la tarta, de lazo, la cinta.
Is that okay there? Right, so to add the border, we're going to use, this is the FMM textured lace set. Several different sets we do. This is set 1.
Este es el set 1 de cortadores y marcadores de bordes de FMM. Yo la verdad que los tengo hace muchísimo tiempo y no los uso, así que tengo muchísimo interés en ver cómo se hace.
So again, this is sugar paste with CMC added in white.
Otra vez pasta de goma con CMC, la proporción que ha dicho antes, una cucharadita por 250 gramos en blanco.
Right, just to help me roll out, I'm just going to add a touch of
Sí, tengo todo de
the white vegetable fat. And if you start, I like to start by rolling a sausage shape because we want to cut, it's obviously longer strips.
Otra vez va a ser como una salchicha, como dicen ellos, yo le digo rulito, y a partir de ahí ya lo extiende, porque queremos una forma alargada, ya que estos cortadores son alargados.
And the thickness for this, you don't want it too thin, as if you were to roll the paste this sort of thickness, and you would then try to emboss with one of these, you would just cut straight through the paste.
No lo podemos extender muy fino porque necesitamos que marque y que no corte con el marcador. Entonces lo va a dejar como a unos 2-3 milímetros, right? Yeah. Entre 2-3 milímetros.
Right, so when that's rolled out, again, dust your board with some cornstarch or icing sugar. And you then choose the design that you wish to use, and you would then position that onto the paste, and you press fairly firmly and just move your fingers all the way along to make sure you've got that embossed design. If you then lift from one of the corners and remove that, and I mean you can make strips as long as you feel comfortable working with to add to the cake.
Tenemos que marcar y presionar firmemente para que se marque bien con el diseño que hayamos elegido, y podemos hacer la cinta todo lo larga que queramos, pero me imagino que si no la haces tan larga luego los puedes ir uniendo. Hay que marcar bien firme para que marque todo.
So I've only actually got mine thick, long enough to do 2 strips. So once it's embossed, you can line this up and you could just, keep going. I'd say probably no more than 4 or 5. Because if you start to get too long, when you try and add it to a cake, if you're using it as a border, it would just stretch.
Dice que aconseja entre no más de 4 o 5 de una vez, porque luego cuando lo vas a poner sobre la tarta, pues se te deforma y se pueden unir fácilmente. Así que ella ha hecho 2.
So you then take this is the cutter that comes with a set. So it's similar sort of principle to when we made the
y ahora va a utilizar el
front
cortador.
of the booties, where the cutter will just literally slot into the grooves that we have embossed.
O sea que cada set viene con varios marcadores diferentes y un cortador.
So press down.
Presionamos fuerte y movemos.
Give it a little wiggle. Move along, and you can almost do it without even looking, and you just feel it slot into the grooves. I'm trying to do it without the table wobbling.
Ah, es que se mueve la mesa.
Right. And you can then take a knife and just trim off the...
Después con un cuchillo quitamos el exceso.
And again, just trim.
Cortamos la parte de abajo.
Along the base of your strip. And I don't know if you can see. So what you can do then to add to your cake, to make it easier, if that's probably the length that you could just lift and place on, but what you can actually do is, if you just roll it up, you may find it easier to add and unroll.
Para que no se nos deforme y hacerlo un poquito más fácil, lo podemos enrollar.
So I'm just going to take, this is just a water pen brush.
Es un pincel que tiene ya agua dentro, porque aquí pega con agua, no con pegamento comestible.
Is that coming out?
You're using water because of the shine.
I mean, you could use edible glue, but because this paste is still soft, water's fine. I'm not sure if it's not coming out, is it?
Working. I love them, but they don't work.
Right.
They're
not working, so we'll switch to edible glue.
Que no está funcionando bien el pincel que lleva agua incorporada, así que con pegamento también se puede hacer. Ahora, cuidado. No, the brush is FMM.
No.
No lo tenemos porque
this
no
is just this one here. Yeah, it's just a water pen brush which you can get from any art or
lo
craft
venden en
store.
muchísimos sitios de manualidades, pero yo me he comprado un montón porque son súper chulos, pero no funcionan.
I've rolled that up the wrong way.
Cuando no sale y cuando presionas te sale la gota de golpe, entonces no. Así que pegamento, cuidado con el pegamento para que no salirnos, que si no queda el brillo. Bueno, agua es porque el pegamento, si te sales un poquito, queda brillo y el agua no queda brillo. Le voy a preguntar, pero yo diría que no, que en todo caso el vodka. Somebody's asking if we can use the edible glue just for shiny, for bright, to make it shiny. Something.
No, you'd use if you want to make it a shine, you could use vodka or confectioner's glaze. I quite like to use vodka to actually stick these on. The nice thing about that is that you can just brush the whole base of the cake and it will stay sort of tacky long enough for you to attach the strip, but because it evaporates, if you were brushing all of this with edible glue and then attaching this, you would still see the brush strokes from the edible glue. So using the vodka just means that it would just evaporate, so you wouldn't see any marks.
Para darle brillo nunca le pondría pegamento comestible, dice que vodka utilizaría. Y el vodka lo que tiene es que se evapora muy rápido, entonces a veces pues para poner las cosas alrededor se te saca demasiado rápido, pero el vodka hace brillo. Yo cuando quiero hacer el efecto charol o algo así, le pongo una capita de vodka y queda el brillo. Y también hay otra cosa que se llama confectioner's glaze, confectioner's glaze, y eso da también brillito, pero es el mismo efecto más o menos. Clara de huevo, pero claro, da. Y luego se agrieta también la clara de huevo. Pero pipín gel no se llega a secar nunca, es la cosa. 10 minutes. Okay. Así, directamente, si quieres. Yo lo que... No, porque se evapora súper rápido, entonces no te humedece la tarta. Es lo bueno que tiene el vodka. El vodka es el mejor porque no tiene azúcar como el ron, entonces se evapora muy rápido, tampoco te deja un olor fuerte. No, el ron no, porque tiene azúcar y deshace. No deja sabor ni olor, se evapora. Sí, le puedes dar la capa de brillo perfectamente con vodka porque se evapora muy rápido, sí.
I think if I just do this top border and then I'll move on to the...
Solamente vamos a hacer el borde de la parte de arriba porque no da tiempo a más y acabamos los cubos.
So you would just, with your strips of lace, as many as you feel comfortable working with, you would just continue around the base of each tier. So you do around the bottom tier here, around the top tier, and you would just trim. When the paste meets at the back, you just trim as neatly as you can with a knife.
I didn't understand that you always start in the back. No?
So yeah, you'd want to...
Siempre empezamos por la parte de atrás de la tarta, por si al final no te cuadra todo cuando terminas.
Not like I've done. Yeah, because it's a continuous design.
Sí, pero la unión prácticamente no se nota. Le das un poquito con el dedo y no se nota la unión. Es muy bonito. She's asking how many cakes do you make in a day, in one day?
Me? I tend to do more kind of teaching stuff now and not so many of the customer orders. I've got 3 and 4 year olds, so whatever I can fit in around them.
Ha hecho 3, 4 de una vez, pero vamos, que normalmente da clases.
So you can see, so this is the back of the cake here. So you would just attach the final piece and just trim as neatly as you can and just butt that together there. Sorry. So obviously you would continue around the base of the lower tier as well.
Luego pondríamos la parte de abajo también, pero ahora vamos rápidamente a hacer lo de los cubitos porque nos estamos quedando sin tiempo ya.
Right, then just to finish off the name blocks quickly. So take the white paste that's been sat
ya está seco más o
for a
menos
few minutes,
la parte blanca
and the smaller of the square
con el
cutters.
cuadrado pequeño.
Press down, wiggle around.
Cortamos, movemos.
I find it easier while the paste is still actually in the cutter to attach this straight away to the blocks. So
Le resulta más fácil directamente sacarlo sobre el cubito.
And again, with these, if you're using vodka or some sort of clear alcohol, if you were to brush this straight on, it's a lot better, I find, because you won't be left with any of the marks of the edible glue, as the vodka would just evaporate.
Le pone un poquito de pegamento, porque el pegamento, como tarda más en secarse, le permite moverlo ahora si no lo ha centrado bien. Si fuera vodka, te cuesta más porque se seca muy rápido.
So you're just positioning.
Se puede también con vodka, pero si quieres que te permita moverlo un poquito, el pegamento resbala y tarda un poquito más en secarse. En figuras planas, no, yo las flores las pego con vodka siempre, sí, los pétalos, sí. No pego con pegamento al revés porque el pétalo resbala, entonces prefiero que se quede rápidamente.
So again, you just continue. This paste is still quite soft, so I'd say you could probably leave it a good half an hour before you try it. The firmer really, the better they are, especially as they're being stuck to a flat surface. There's no risk of them breaking, if you were having to put it around a curved surface.
Claro, es que está todavía un poquito blanda, lo hubiera dejado casi media hora más, porque estaba aquí, si lo hubiera dejado en una rejilla o algo, pues hubiera secado antes, ¿no? Pero aquí estaba, entonces lo encuentra que está blandito todavía, pero bueno, son las cosas del directo.
So again, because it's still quite soft, see, I've popped that on, it's not right in the centre. If it were really hard, I would just be able to move that along with my finger and I'd get no marks, no stretching.
Si estuviera más durito, se le hubiera secado más, lo podría mover más fácilmente para ajustarlo al centro. Pero bueno, está un poco blando.
Right, so that's all the squares added to the blocks. We're then going to move on to the tappets to cut the letters.
Ahora las letras.
So these are the tappets here. So basically to use them, you can actually cut this down so you've got a longer, thinner strip to work with.
Cortamos un poquito para que esté bien fina y larga y así se usan.
You then take whichever your chosen letter may be, and you place onto the paste.
Vamos eligiendo la letra que queremos, presionamos fuerte.
Press down firmly and just give it a wiggle on the board.
Movemos y separamos.
Remove any of the excess paste.
Le quitamos el exceso y con ayuda de un cuchillo para ver.
You should see how the letter is in there.
Ahora, ¿para dónde? ¿Para allá? Ay,
Right, to remove these, you simply just take the cutter and you just tap and they literally just pop out.
Habéis visto qué fácil saca la letra. Como ya se ha secado un poquito, clac, golpe y sale.
So any letters that you've got, for instance the O, which has a centre, you can just take a knife or needle tool, scribing tool,
Con
and just
cualquier
remove.
punzón, cuchillo, quitamos la parte que no nos interesa y lo otro sacamos de una vez, de un golpe.
So really simple to use, but I find the key to getting successful letters is definitely to leave the paste to air dry. As it means when you're tapping the letters out, if it was still really soft, a lot of the letters, because the detail is so fine, can tend to distort and sort of be knocked out of shape when they're flying out of the cutters.
No me he enterado mucho, pero no lo estaba escuchando, pero vamos, que es súper cómodo sacarlo de esta manera. Es que me he distraído. Que, claro, es muy interesante dejarlo secar y es que así salen perfectas. Yo es que me volvía loca para sacar las letras. Me volvía loca. Sí, se estiran y de esta manera nada. They were realizing now how easy it is.
They're the most well-known product for FMM, but the one that most people struggle with.
Claro que es un producto buenísimo de FMM, pero que casi nadie sabe cómo usarlo. Y salen perfectas.
Right, so you would then just take your blocks, line them up. And again, I would recommend, I haven't got any with me here today, but using alcohol to attach the letters for the same reasons that I've just explained. But I've just got edible glue, so...
Nos aconseja utilizar alcohol tipo vodka, pero como no tiene aquí, pues lo que está haciendo es pegarlo con pegamento, ¿vale? Pero el vodka en este caso para que pegue más rápido. Yo lo suelo hacer con agua porque no deja brillo, entonces... And water also.
Yes, water's fine.
Sí, con agua.
Whichever, I think it's personal preference, so whichever you prefer to...
I prefer with water because it doesn't get any mud.
Yeah.
Sí, realmente con agua en este caso sería lo más acertado porque no dejas marcas si te sales. So beautiful.
And again, this is a cake that you could also make, you could do in blue for a boy.
La he hecho en rosa, pero la podemos hacer en azul para un niño.
Again, if you're adding the letters to a flat surface like these, you can leave them to dry completely, which makes it even easier to attach them.
Do you need the cake? ¿Dónde la ponemos? Can you put it there?
Yeah. Here? Right, so obviously we haven't had time to do it all today, but you imagine you'd have this lace border would be going around the base of this tier. You would then take your booties, which would... Had to excuse this, has snapped in transport. This has come all the way from England.
El que traía hecho se le ha roto de Inglaterra, que acaba de llegar. Abajo le hubiéramos puesto una cinta igual que la de arriba.
So you would secure these to the top of the cake with a small amount of royal icing.
El zapato sí lo pegaríamos ya con un poquito de glasa.
And again, the blocks, I like to position them all in a straight line, but you could also do them, you know, offset, whichever.
Se pueden colocar en rectos o desordenados.
I did want to show you as well, but I think we've actually gone over, haven't we? What I normally tend to do with the booties as well, as an alternative to this lace, is you can still use the lace cutters to make the booties, but you can also use these mini it's a blossom cutter and ejector, so I'd roll out lilac paste thinly, and then it's quite a lot of flowers, but you just cover the
Se le pueden
boots.
pegar florecitas
So that's how you
también.
would do. If you've seen the card that's been going round, that's just been done with these, and then they are just applied
En la
all
foto que
over
habéis
the...
visto tenía flores. And do you put some...
Yes, again, you'd secure these with royal icing.
En este caso ya lo pegamos con glasa también.
And your decorations like the booties and the blocks can be made well in advance and stored until you're ready to add them to your cake.
Tanto los cubos como los patucos los podemos tener preparados con antelación, con días de antelación, y luego la tarta es facilísima, en un momentito lo haces. Así que, muy bien, muchas gracias.
Thank you.